The recent scandals at Wizards of the Coast has rightfully brought much of the community to arms, spurred on by various large content creators and community leaders. Many of the top D&D content creators have shared their fears and frustrations in regard to the recent shift in policy at Hasbro, and are now in the process of restructuring their plans for video content in 2023. Some of you have already made the switch from playing 5th edition to systems such as Pathfinder 2nd edition, Old School Essentials, Dungeon Crawl Classic and the like, but there are many people who still play D&D 5e and look to be mostly either sticking with the system or moving to D&D 1 in the future. Let's discuss why. Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition was released officially in 2014, just before the golden age of TTRPGs had begun. It was after this point that D&D content on YouTube and other platforms began to skyrocket, and many new players flocked to the game. A lot of the people who have come to 5e have never played a TTRPG before, and so learned the concept of tabletop gaming by playing what is one of the most streamlined and simple systems available. These players got comfortable playing a system that gave the players a lot of autonomy, control and power. A system where character death is less frequent and characters tend to be much stronger and more heroic than what is seen in other systems, apart from Pathfinder, I imagine. There is also a belief that in 5th edition that the players are always right, and it's Dungeon Master's job and duty to appease them. This is clearly a sweeping statement, but you don't have to go far on social media to have found people speaking that way about D&D and their games. In OSR games, most systems encourage a Dungeon Master to retain control over the game and make decisions confidently. This pushback from other systems against players can upset some people who have been taught by D&D related social media and other community leaders that D&D players should be able to do what they want, when they want, and have whatever homebrew they want. This infantile behaviour is something that I might get criticism for calling out in this video, but as somebody who started playing D&D from 5th edition, I've seen it a lot. These other systems are also typically much more dangerous, which is something that I think a lot of 5e players generally aren't used to, nor like. They are used to their characters being knocked unconscious, picked back up, knocked back down again, and so on. The idea of playing a system that punishes their mistakes is something that a lot of 5e players struggle to get their heads around, and this is likely why those of you who've been looking to make the switch at your tables to another system have had trouble doing so. For those of you who are switching to Pathfinder, it's very unlikely that you'll have this issue, as the system is a more robust, finished version of 5th edition from what I've been told by many of you at the channel, and shares a lot of the same core fundamentals of the system. But for those of you who are playing more old school systems, it's a different, more difficult story. The last thing that is worth considering is that a lot of 5e players really seem to enjoy long-term storytelling and character development, something they don't see themselves having in other systems. When people tell them that their characters die when they hit negative hit points, they don't tend to mention that this doesn't really happen frequently if you're playing with a brain. A lot of players assume that their characters will die often, and not many 5e players want to invest time into a character for a game that'll kill them regularly. Gone are the times when younger players went into deadly dungeons and got insta-killed by traps. If you do that in a 5e game, you're a bad dungeon master. It's really interesting to consider the massive shift of gameplay and kind of, gameplay ethics that has happened over the last 50 years. You might be wondering what you can do to encourage your players to try a different system, and my recommendation would be to run one-shots first. Allowing your players to try and test these systems to realise, that it's not actually as bad as they think can do a lot to make them feel more comfortable. Alternatively, you can just turn around and tell your players that you're switching systems, and if they don't like it, they can walk. That's definitely a more extreme way of tackling it, but sometimes compromise can lead to conflict, and not all sacrifices are worth making. I'm releasing my own homebrew rule set for 5th edition on my Patreon, along with a bunch of tables and stat blocks to improve your games. If you're looking for something that can help your players slowly make the transition to OSR, feel free to pick up the rules. It's only 10 pages long, but full of playtested material which you can use to start making your game much more swords and sorcery themed. Some people in life are just impossible to engage with, and to be honest, it's their right to play whatever system they want to. No matter what happens in the next couple of years, D&D will continue, and Wont D&D and its VTT is likely to force its way into open play. The best thing for those of us who stand against their decisions, or the decisions of Hasbro, is to just not give them our business, and instead support games that have fostered better relationships with their communities. This brings us towards the end of our video. I've covered a lot of talking points today, and I'm really interested in knowing what you guys think about the video that I've covered. If you've already switched systems, what system did you go to and how difficult was it? For those of you who play other systems, what things can we tell D&D players to encourage them to make the jump to the system that you play? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for your continued support. We've recently just made partner on YouTube, which is a huge accomplishment for me. I hope you guys have a great week of gaming. I'll see you guys next time on Loki's Lair. Until then.